Hello and welcome to episode 310 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty Dad FF. You can tell I'm excited to just throw this onto YouTube because we're going to make this really cool edit. Make sure we put in all the tiers and talk about things. A lot of you guys are asking about the 2025 rookies. And now that we're in combine week, we're going to see them test out and what they look like, how they jump, what their 40 times are, what their cone drills, everything. We're going to get a little bit deeper into the 2025 rookie process. And when we do that, Snoog and I wanted to bring you an idea of where these guys fit in now. How do they look compared to the current wide receiver landscape? Nobody better to talk wide receivers. Nobody better to talk combine than my main man, Snoog.
Thanks for having me on, Dad, as always. I love doing this, and I love the combine. So it's literally Christmas morning for you and I. We're going to be probably talking the whole week about it. But the wide receivers, man, I'm excited to jump into this. The deepest landscape I've seen at a position in a long time in Dynasty Fantasy Football. And we're about to talk about a historic, probably the best wide receiver class we've ever seen at the wide receiver position in 2024 that we're just freshly coming off to what's considered a much weaker 2025 rookie wide receiver class that I think and you think has four really good wide receivers. So they're going to be in this video today, and we're going to talk about this. And I don't think there's a better time to do that because I think they're all going to have good combines and all improve their draft stock. They're all going to be first-round draft picks. They're going to slide nicely into the top 25. So let's jump into this video.
Yeah, what's really cool about the dynasty landscape for the wide receivers right now is I have them 36 different wide receivers right now are worth the 112 or more, which last year it was about 24. And now guys have ascended in value. Guys have moved into that area where we want to spend a little bit more on them. And now we're going to add at least 4 wide receivers, maybe 5, depending on how draft capital goes, but at least 4 guys into that. Snoog, that's 40 wide receivers deep. And when you look at startup values right now, the running back position has about 15 guys that I'd spend this on. The quarterback position always has a ton. Tight end only has about 8. So the current market for wide receivers is dominant the dynasty landscape. So, without further ado, obviously tier 1, that's our smash tier. Those are our guys that these guys are going round 1 of your startups. This is Justin Jefferson and Ja'Marr Chase. You and I talk about it all the time, right? Whereas every year they've kind of gone back and forth. It was Chase in 23 or 24, Jefferson in 23. The value's going back and forth. I have Chase as my 1, Jefferson as my 2. You're splitting hairs because I think every year we're going to see them, vie back and forth to see who that guy is now. Everyone's heard about those guys. We don't need to spend a ton of time really talking about who's at the top, right? Because everybody knows that. They're very difficult to buy. The next tier down, there's a guy that you and I both said is the next Ja'Marr Chase. There's a guy that we said, you know what? In a year from now, he's going to be worth the same amount. And you can still get a little bit on top when you're trading from Chase and Jefferson down to Malik Nabers. But that window is closing rapidly.
Yeah, Malik Nabers is a rookie that 21 years old, one of the best wide receiver prospects we've seen come out in a while alongside Marvin Harrison Jr. First round pick, top 6 draft capital, checked every box coming out as a player, coming out of college at LSU, had a phenomenal season in 2024 as well. He should have won the Biletnikoff Award. I don't know if that's a political thing, why he didn't, and they just gave it to Marv, but should have been Malik Nabers. This is a guy that came off. It's a guy that came off 1,200 plus yards as a rookie with the Giants, with 0 quarterback play, 18 plus fantasy points per game, 100 plus receptions. He was literally pacing out a 1,400 yard season and probably 190 targets. He had 170 targets in 15 games, 100 plus receptions. He's a do-it-all generational type wide receiver that's going to cement himself as a top 5 dynasty wide receiver for the next 5 to 10 years. He's on the same level as a Chase and Jefferson. I think those guys are a bit more polished and a bit more better, but he's definitely one of the best wide receivers in the NFL already today. And you already saw his floor. It's crazy to say a floor is 1,200 yards and 170 targets in 15 games as a 21-year-old rookie, but they don't have a quarterback. And I do think there's a chance they get Sanders or Ward. So yeah, exactly. If they get Stafford, he's going to, oh my gosh, I don't even want to think about that, but that'd be phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely dominant floor, someone that's going to be phenomenal. I think you could still give, Chase or Jefferson in a second and still get a first for Malik Nabers. By the end of the year, you're not going to be able to. He's a lot of people's dynasty wide receiver 1. he will likely be the dynasty wide receiver 1 by the time the season is over, even if he posts a similar type season. And we saw his floor. So the writing's on the wall. He's going to be there. I wore my purple polo just for Jefferson, but Nabers is going to pass him because those guys are going to be 26 and he's going to be 22, and he's going to be doing 2 years in a row.
Yeah, so there's another guy kind of honestly in this same tier, in the same range that some people are saying is the top 3, top 5 dynasty wide receiver. Speaking of Matthew Stafford, it's Puka Nacua. Talk to us about him, Dad, and see where you're kind of at with him. Like, what happens if Stafford leaves? What happens if Kupp leaves? Where's his value going to look like, and why do you have him here?
Yeah, and again, with this particular format, I mean, we all know Ceedee Lamb's a stud, so we're just going to throw him up there in this tier. The A tier has a multitude of guys. You mentioned Nabers. I think Ceedee Lamb's the next guy to go. After that, for me, Amon'Ra's in there. We definitely got to consider him, so throw him up on the board. But then for me, it's Puka Nacua. Like, Puka Nacua, everyone said his rookie year was a bit of a flash, right? He came out of nowhere. You were getting him in the 4th round in your rookie drafts, and he goes out there. And in 2025, a lot of people were like down on Puka. They said, yeah, that was just it. It was just one-time flash. This is what's going to happen. Cooper Kupp's going to come back. This is his team. Sorry. Look at what he did from 2024 as a rookie, 2.7 yards per route run. The sophomore, 3.2. That's wild to get better in that. 6.15 receptions per game. He goes up to 7.18. Insanity that you broke the reception record as a rookie and you get better. He had a 27% target share, went up to 35, 17.6 up to 18.8. And oh, by the way, Cooper Kupp's gone. If Matthew Stafford leaves, that gives them a minor hit. But the biggest thing in Dynasty is when you're talking about elite level wide receivers, you are going to have their longevity last longer. You saw Malik Nabers played with Daniel Jones, put up monster numbers. I think Puka Nacua, with a solid quarterback, can put up those numbers. Even if Matthew Stafford leaves, I still don't believe he's going to. I feel like we have a lot of things that have to fall into place. But let's just say even he leaves and Aaron Rodgers, who's been tied to them, comes in. You're going to see a Garrett Wilson type floor from Puka Nacua, but the ceiling is still there. Like, they're going to address the quarterback position. They're going to bring somebody in. If they get a Sam Darnold instead of Stafford, I don't think he takes a step back. There's so many scenarios where Puka Nacua stays where he's at.
Yep.
And like we said, S tier, you got Nabers, you got Lamb, you got Amon'Ra, then Puka and Snoog. It's crazy, but there's another rookie wide receiver who has entered this, and a lot of people argue he belongs above some of these others because he's so young, because he's so explosive, because he's in an area where the target share should be massive. And Brian Thomas Jr. is that guy. You and I loved him coming out. He went to where we wanted to. Absolute smash, Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, we manifested that for a while, but I'll be honest, I didn't think he'd be this good. He was my favorite wide receiver in last year's class by a mile. I did everything I could to bump up his draft stock and hype him up on Twitter all up until the combine. He finally ran that 4.33, boosted his draft stock through the roof, got first-round draft capital, went to the Jaguars like we always said. We wanted him to be that T. Higgins, that Justin Ross for Trevor Lawrence like we saw at Clemson. He finally got his guy. This is a guy that had 1,287 yards as a rookie in a Jaguars offense that was horrible without Trevor Lawrence for most of the year. 133 targets, 87 receptions, just an absolutely phenomenal rookie season from a wide receiver like Brian Thomas Jr. What made me so high on him as a rookie and as a prospect was the fact that he was 6'2", 6'3", 210, 215 pounds, and he was so fluid and so nimble after the catch and in short areas. You don't see big wide receivers run that fast and be that agile and that smooth as a route runner. In his release off the line of scrimmage, everything was polished. He looked very good. People kept trying to say he was DK Metcalf, this, that. He was so much more polished than those guys. His route tree was limited because he was literally playing with another superstar wide receiver in Malik Nabers right next to him. And they both literally ran strictly certain route trees that complemented each other's skill sets. But BTJ is an alpha. There's a reason why he's that wide receiver 7 in this tier. You could argue him honestly above some of the guys above him, maybe with Liam Cohen coming, with Trevor Lawrence healthy, but superstar wide receiver. I had a top 15 NFL draft grade on him coming out. So he proved us how good he could be, and he hit the ceiling that we didn't even think that he could hit. We thought he was going to be like a top 15 guy, but no, he's in that top 7, top 8 range. So I'm excited for Brian Thomas Jr. I'm going to have to buy that jersey soon.
Yeah, and I love that A tier has gotten bigger. Last year, it was like 2 guys. Now we're talking there are 5 guys in that A tier, meaning there are 7 guys going in your top 2 rounds of startups. Now is the time to really build around those young wide receivers. There's so many good guys. We told you about it before last year's rookie season. Right now we got our rookie draft guide for 2025. Snoog put a ton of work into that. We have all of our rankings in the Patreon. We have everything in there, patreon.com/smash accept. Because when you're talking rookies, that's your biggest time to make a difference, right? You were drafting BTJ at the 1-9 last year. You were drafting Malik Nabers sometimes 1-3, maybe 1-4. And those were exponential gains. You went from Malik Nabers being the 1-4 to being worth 3 firsts. You went from BTJ being the 1-9 to being worth over 2 firsts. And this year's class has some wide receivers as well.
Yeah, exactly. So before we jump into B tier and before we jump into our first rookie wide receiver, I'll hand it over to you. But Nico Collins starts off this tier for us. He's in this B tier. These are guys that are rock solid wide receiver ones. They're tied to good quarterbacks. They're young. They're producing at a wide receiver 1 level. Sell us on the first rookie wide receiver coming off the board in 2025, who's projected top 5 to 10 draft capital, has elite production profile coming out of college, and is a guy that plays very similar to like a BTJ or like a field stretching, big athletic player that can catch the ball at all 3 levels, has a great catch radius, and is a great athlete coming to college. So sell us on Tetairoa McMillan.
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, Nico is the start of B tier. I think Tet is the back end of B tier. So as we start putting these guys up, we're going to start to put them into place of where they actually belong. But B tier for me, these are guys that are worth the 102 to 103. These are guys that I would not give the 101 for Nico right now. I think they're very even. Nico's right there above, but everybody else here, it's 102 to 103 in this tier. And the 102 right now on my current boards is Tetairoa McMillan. I mean, he is someone back-to-back 1,300-yard seasons, 6'5", incredibly fluid movements, can play versatile on the X. He can play in the slot. He is a mismatch nightmare. I think he demonstrates elite ball tracking ability. Someone that can get, you throw him that 50-50 ball a la Mike Evans, he's going to go out there and he's going to go get it. A lot of people comp him to Mike Evans, to T. Higgins, to Drake London. And I think that's about right. And I think the next part of this is the elite draft capital. Most mocks, we saw Daniel Jeremiah mock him all the way to 19 to the Bucks. I think that dips him down a tier into C tier if that does happen. But a lot of really sharp analysts, your Dane Bruglers and guys like that, have him going to the Panthers, have him going to the Patriots. I think the Patriots ultimately pass. But if we can get him to the Panthers at 8, Snoog, sky's the limit. I mean, Bryce Young really stepped up last year. You give him an alpha wide receiver. We saw, honestly, Adam Thielen was putting up 15 fantasy points per game. Imagine Tet McMillan in that Adam Thielen spot. He's going to put up monster rookie season, very similar to Brian Thomas Jr. And that's why I really love picking him right now at this point. I think the 102 is a very up for grabs. But if I had this 102, I'm almost thinking I'm interested in trading for a guy from last year's class. Like, I love Tet McMillan, but I don't think talent-wise he matches the same as another guy here in B tier, slightly above Tet. Marvin Harrison Jr. is due for a breakout this year. 800 yards, 8 touchdowns last year. That's rarefied air. And I don't think if BTJ and Malik Nabers didn't ball out the way we did, you'd be like, all right, Marv's ascending. He's on the right track. But those guys played so well, people are kind of forgetting how good Marvin Harrison Jr. really is.
Yeah, you mentioned it. 880 yards and 8+ touchdowns as a rookie. There was a tweet I saw that the company that is in is really good. So it's not something to worry about. I mean, you got guys like T. Higgins, CeeDee Lamb, a lot of the NFL studs nowadays didn't have the craziest rookie years, right? It just started becoming more and more popular. He only had 116 targets. Yeah. So many of his targets were overthrown, or he literally should have scored like 14 touchdowns. And that Rams game alone, I think he had 3. He should have had like 4. Like, Kyler overthrew him on an easy fade route within the goal line. That was a touchdown. Then there was another one that he caught that they ruled incomplete, but I'm sure everybody's seen the clips against the Bills where he runs that beautiful deep post route and breaks the ankles of the safety and Kyler doesn't hit him. Would have been like a 75-yard touchdown. He's one of those, if you watched the film, you knew he was good and you knew that he's due for positive regression. When I talk about a historical wide receiver class, that 2024 class, like, there's 3 guys confidently. There's maybe a 4th guy that we're taking over Tet right now. with the value, not as prospects, but right now with the value and what they've done and where they're landed. Marvin Harrison's one of them, and it's because he was drafted 4th overall in the NFL draft. He's a damn near generational type talent. Him and Nabers were some of the best wide receiver prospects we've seen. It's like you get Chase, you get those two, you get like those were honestly 3 of the better wide receiver prospects we've gotten in a long, long time. Like, so that's what I'm saying when I talk about these guys is you're getting guys that are gonna be elite producers. And I honestly think the Cardinals situation can only get better than what it was. Marv's going to be a 140 target plus 1,200 yard and 10 plus touchdown guy next year. Mark my words, because you saw Drake London and some of those other guys that struggled a little bit, struggle with quarterback play, struggle with systems and coaching staffs and all that. And then they finally hit their stride and they're a 1,200 yard, 100 reception season type player. And that's what Marv has in his bag.
Yeah. And
jumping over to another player in this.
Hold on. I got you here because this is what I got excited here. As soon as we talked about this, I know I'm switching it up here a little bit, but we talked about that tweet. I think he has a very similar career arc and pedigree to what we saw from Ceedee Lamb. You know, Ceedee Lamb is a rookie, 74, 935, and 5. And then his sophomore season, he comes out and goes over 1,100 yards. Then the guy I want to talk about next, who's in this tier, I have him right behind Nico Collins. It's Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Same tier. That you see rookie season, 63, 628, and 4. Major disappointment, right? Solid numbers considering he had those, missed 4 games and was banged up a little bit in training camp and stuff. Year 2, 100 receptions, 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns, 14.9 fantasy points per game. I think sticking with Ohio State, these guys have the pedigree. These guys have the upside that they're going to be in that B tier with the opportunity that I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Marv could join A tier. If those guys have another season, if Jaxon Smith-Njigba puts another 100 reception season up, or if Marv does the same, they have the pedigree, they have the name cachet. And in Dynasty, it's so important that a guy has likability. And people love JSN. People love Marvin Harrison Jr. Another big season, and those guys are going to escalate into major Dynasty values. So, I love both of them right now in the 3rd round of startups. Crazy value.
Well, what if I told you that there was a better Ohio State wide receiver that you left off for JSN and Garrett Wilson, who's 3 straight seasons with 1,000 yards with the worst quarterback play in the league. And now he's getting a reset at head coach, reset at everything. Could leave the team. If he does, he's going to be a top 6 wide receiver in fantasy. If not, he's still a guy that's rock solid, top 10, top 12. I have him over JSN. He'd actually be 10 right below Marv for me. Mm-hmm. So just wanted to get him on the board. Keeping it on brand with the 2024 rookie again, sell us on Ladd McConkey because I see you have him up here. What does he do, and where do you compare him to Tet, someone that you just covered a couple minutes ago, and kind of talk about that landscape and what that looks like between those two players?
Perfect. I love that you mentioned Garrett Wilson because you got those 3 Ohio State guys all here in tier 3. So, I mean, we got Nico, we got JSN, and Wilson already in there. We got Marv in there, and there's a couple more guys. But for me, I think Ladd McConkey, as long as we don't see major competition come in there, I think he's the type of wide receiver. You saw what he was able to do down the stretch. He was putting up, I believe over 17 fantasy points per game, the back 9 of the season, dominated in the playoffs with the most dominant wide receiver rookie performance we've ever seen, where I believe he put up over 190 yards. I mean, he was unstoppable. And as they kind of had that rapport there with Justin Herbert and him, he belongs up here. Now, does he have the same athletic pedigree as these guys? No, not at all. Nico Collins, JSN, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Marvin Harrison Jr., A.J. Brown, and Tet McMillan all have much more athletic profiles than Ladd McConkey. But what Ladd McConkey does is he is an elite separator. He is someone that's literally unguardable in a phone booth. Like he gets himself open. And yes, his route running ability is unbelievable. And he has Justin Herbert's trust. And Justin Herbert is a top 12 dynasty quarterback. I believe Ladd McConkey belongs in this tier. A lot of people vary where they're at. I have it Nico, JSN, Ladd, Garrett. But I can see this whole tier being very fluid, being able to move around quite a bit. I think we move around. We talk about who we want to in that area. I think what else do we have here? I mean, you have Drake London. I love Drake London. Drake London finished out the season on an absolute tear. He was like over the Michael Penix time. he was a top 5 wide receiver. Even over if in PPR, he was the wide receiver 1 during a good part of that stretch, over a 2 or 3 game stretch. I know it's a small sample size, but he's been dealing, much like Garrett Wilson, with some of the worst quarterback play anybody's ever seen. It was really, really bad. And the final guy of this tier, he's the veteran. He's the OG. He just got a Super Bowl ring. Sell me on A.J. Brown. And do you prefer A.J. Brown or Tetairoa McMillan at the end of this tier?
Yeah, that's close. From like a contending standpoint, A.J. Brown for sure. But from like a market value and dynasty perspective, if Tet goes top 10, I'd have to lean Tet there just for projections and stuff. But A.J. Brown's a guy that paced another 1,400-yard season, and everyone acts like he had the worst season ever. He battled through a hamstring injury. In like 11 games, the dude had 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. Like if you pace that out, nobody's talking about this. If you pace that out, he would have been another top 5 wide receiver, and that would leave him with, since 2022, 3 straight seasons with close to 90-plus receptions, 1,400-plus yards, and double-digit touchdowns. That is wide receiver 1 all over it. That is, if I'm contending, I'm getting a 27-year-old stud tied to an elite offense with chemistry with his quarterback in that top 12 to 15 range. He's a smash value for me. I have him everywhere already. I would still be buying him, but that ends this tier for us. So that shapes out that top 15 dynasty wide receiver ranking process so far. We'll get into the last 10 to 15 guys here, but those guys are all rock solid wide receiver 1s plus. Any of them can finish top 5. Any of them can finish top 3. Any of them can finish 10, 12, 13. They're going to give you that high floor and they're going to give you that ceiling. That's why they're in that range. And none of them have injuries, and most of them have decent to good quarterback play. So that's what matters. That's what we're looking for in our cornerstone foundational wide receiver rankings in that top 15. Let's jump into the next guy here that I'm excited about.
Well, we're going on to C tier now. And I think there's one guy here, Snoog, that if he maintained the pace that he was on, a guy that you and I bought everywhere in the offseason, Rashee Rice would be in B tier if he played the whole 2024 season. I have no doubt in my mind. You look at guys that topped out the yards per route run, Puka Nacua at 3.42, Rashee Rice at 3.30, Nico Collins at 2.98, A.J. Brown at 2.98, and McConkey at 2.79. The only guys up over that 2.7. That is an elite statistic. He was open all the time. Patrick Mahomes was a different quarterback with Rashee Rice. Like, he was peppering him where Travis Kelce was able to sit back, relax. And we saw Xavier Worthy really turn it around towards the end of the season. But those early games, 14 targets, 9 targets, 6 targets, averaging over almost 100 yards per game, 2 touchdowns. And it carries over from 2023, where he went on a absolute tear over the back half of the season, where he finished as a top 12 wide receiver from weeks 12 on. He really ascended into that elite level for me. A lot of people in Dynasty are worried. They're worried about the suspension. They're worried about the injury. Again, the injury was not an ACL. It was a PCL. So it's going to take some time. That deals a lot with your stabilization. But he should be good to go for training camp. At worst, the suspension is going to be 6 games. I think the fact that it's been so long, I feel like it dips down more to the 3 or 4. And you're buying a wide receiver who's going to be an elite wide receiver 1 for years to come, cheaper than the rest of these guys. This tier I have worth the 104 to 105, and I think I would gladly pay the 104 for Rashee Rice, but I don't think you have to. I think you can do a later first plus another first. You do like the 110 plus a 26 first. You kind of put yourself a spot where you're not overpaying to get Rashee Rice. The same guy that is really ascending in this tier, a guy that you and I both love. I know you love me more than I do. Wide receiver 2 in 2024 in a points per game basis. We're talking about potentially being a free agent, but it sounds like the Bengals are going to use the franchise tag. And T. Higgins, either sell me on if he leaves or if he stays. Is there any change? Because his dynasty value belongs here, in that 104 to 105 range. And if you need a wide receiver, I'm paying it.
Yeah, you threw a curveball at me. T. Higgins is good. I mean, he's a guy, like you mentioned, wide receiver 2 in points per game this past season. I want him to stay. Well, I don't want him to stay, but from a fantasy perspective, I do. Because him and Joe Burrow, like, you're guaranteed getting a guy that paces 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns types player. So like a top 12 to 15 player every year. and you're getting a guy that's going to be a rock solid low end wide receiver 1. So you're getting that upside and floor from a player. But from a fan, I would love to see him go be a Charger or go be a Patriot or go be a Panther and go play as the wide receiver 1, because I want to see what his ceiling is full time as a wide receiver 1 with a good quarterback like Drake May, Bryce Young type. So that's how I feel about T. Higgins. He's 26, going on 27 with a year full of injuries. So I'm sure. So I have him a little bit lower in this tier, probably at the back half of this tier, if anything. But I always loved T as a player. He's rock solid. I've always liked him as a player. But
before we jump into that real quick, Matt has a question of how do I take a look at the Patreon? Can you explain it a bit? The Patreon is a Discord. It is all of our content. We have everything in there. He asked about the community. The community right now we've passed 600 now. It is the fastest growing Discord there. Patreon
it's not a Patreon. Patreon's the subscription you pay to get into the Discord. People get confused with that, so I just want to make that clear for everybody. But
yeah, and Michael Kensel says, "Hey, Snoog and Dad, enjoying the content analysis and ready to smash these rookie drafts." So I want to talk real quick because you're where you're at with this tier. Because for me, I have some disagreement there. Is I'm not as high on the other guys here. I have it Rice, T, Devonta, Rome, and Eguka. I think all of these guys is a very fluid process. I have T as 2 out of this group. Who would be your wide receiver 2 in this group?
I think it would be Emeka Eguka as long as he goes first round. And if he's a Ram, a Texan, a chart, like one of those situations, it would be him for me. Yeah. But I go back on what I said right now. I'm looking at my rankings. For some reason, I thought there was other people in this tier. I have it Rashee Rice, T. Higgins, Emeka Eguka, Rome Odunze, Devonta Smith, DJ Moore. So that's what I have in this tier right now. So I would have it be T. Higgins today. But I don't think T. Higgins is in the place to gain a bunch of value like the other guys behind him, like Rome Odunze, like Emeka Eguka. So exactly.
What kind of draft capital does he need in the NFL draft? What does he have to do to the combine? Where does he have to go? Because a lot of people in the industry, not myself and you, but there's a lot of people that have him, not going round 1 in the NFL draft. There's guys that I see moving all the way back to 110, 111 in their rookie rankings. So sell me on Eguka. What does he do well? Where does he need to go in the NFL draft? How does he need to do at the combine? Let's talk a little bit.
Yeah, you remember all the draft analysts last year didn't have Xavier Worthy or Brian Thomas Jr. going round 1, and none of them had more than 4 wide receivers going in round 1. And you and I said that 6 or 7 were going to go, and that it was one of the best wide receiver classes we've ever seen. They're not always right. They put out their opinions, and we're not always right. We're wrong a lot. Like, that's just how the process goes. But the NFL and NFL draft analysts seem to not value the wide receiver position as they should. It's one of the 5 to 6 premium positions. You got offensive tackle, quarterback, wide receiver, edge, cornerback. That's it. Those are the 5 premium positions. Those in wide receiver in a weaker class like this, when you have an Eguka, a Tet, a Burden, one of these type of wide receivers, they're going to skyrocket up boards. I'd be shocked if Eguka makes it past pick 25 with the Texans. I think he's going to go. He's a top 20 grade for me. He's another one of those guys, elite route runner, stud production profile, went toe-to-toe in his 2 best seasons at Ohio State with 1,000+ yards and 80+ receptions with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jeremiah Smith. 2 prospects that are probably some of the best we'll see come out in a while that will go top 3 to 4 in their drafts. Marv already did. I think he's going to really fit in good to a McVay system, whether that's with Nick Caley in the Texans, Sean McVay in the Rams to fill in for Kupp, or he goes to the Chargers or one of these teams that need a every down Keenan Allen type, Amon'Ra St. Brown, JSN type of wide receiver that can win with their feet, win versus zone, win after the catch. He's going to test better than people think. I don't think he's a burner, but I think he's going to be like a 4.4, 4.45 guy. And he's going to have a really, really good showing with his route running skills and how he catches the football. So definitely a player for me that is going to gain value just from today until post-draft, in my opinion, as long as he goes in the first round.
Yeah, then the other 2 guys in this tier, and I have Devonta and Rome. You can argue it either way, however you want to. And when Brock throws him up there, I mean, I think Rome is slightly ahead of Devonta in value. I think Devonta, who I want to talk about, 2,000-yard seasons, 4 straight 5+ touchdown seasons, and I think we still haven't seen his best season yet. Like, I think he is going to be a consummate professional. He's going to play 10 to 12 years. We're going to see him really hold this value. You know, I think a lot of guys play in different styles. He's someone that gets open. He doesn't take a lot of big hits. For as small as he is, he gets open all the time. He has 1,000+ yard capability every single year. And much like T. Higgins, he's playing in the 1B role behind A.J. Brown. But A.J. Brown this year will be, 29 years old or 28, 29. He's right in that area. And Devonta, still just 25, is really entering his prime. And I think the Eagles start to get this a lot closer to a 1A, 1B. And I think Devonta Smith is a good buy. He's teetering on that area where we're now in C tier, but I think he's firmly in there. Who do you prefer between, where Eguka and Devonta? Like, I think Eguka is going to pass him here in value pretty soon. So I think that's kind of where we're at. You're more of a Rome guy. So like Rome last year compared to Eguka this year. If they both come out this year, who you drafted?
I would take Rome. Rome's a better prospect. Yeah. We can't forget about what Rome was as a prospect, and going 9th overall in that draft with those wide receivers on the board. Like, everybody saw it with him. So it's not like one person made a mistake. Like, he was the consensus for a reason. Like, don't forget about how he tested unbelievable, very polished player, had a ton of good flashes. Ben Johnson's going to revive Rome Odunze. He could have a JSN like year 2. The wide receiver landscape is so deep right now. But to me, Eguka and Rome can gain value. Devonta Smith can't unless he leaves the Eagles. Like, he'll be in that 15. He'll move back between 15 and 20 for the next 2 to 3 years. Like, he's just going to keep. But if he could have that Calvin Ridley type year, like if you remember when Julio Jones got injured, Ridley finishes the wide receiver 5 with like 280 points and 13. Smith could have that if AJ Brown's gone for a while. Like, that could be the case. But while AJ Brown's there, while Saquon's there, he's just going to be an 1,110 touchdown type player. I think Eguka and Rome do that in the next 3 years, and they gain to that top 12 range, and they can gain value. So that's why I have them over them there. I'm going to throw a curveball at you now and kind of put you on the spot. There was a rookie wide receiver, the last one, not the last one yet. We'll talk about one that's polarizing at the end here, but there's one that had 1,200 plus yards in the SEC at 19 years old, was the consensus wide receiver one in this class going into last year. So going into the 2024 rookie class, he really had a down year in production this past year. But if you look at the context of his profile, like 3 of the games were like absolutely a joke, and he barely played in them because they were blowouts against bad teams and at the end of the year and all that stuff, bowl games, etc. Luther Burden, where does he fall into this tier for us? Obviously, we're projecting first round draft capital for this guy. We think all 4 of these guys go in round 1. And I say 4 because we'll talk about him in a little bit. But what about Burden? Like, where can he be like Eguka and Tet to you, where he jumps? I know you actually have him as your wide receiver 2, I believe. Do you think he can be a top 12 wide receiver, and why? Yeah,
so I mean, this tier is awesome. This tier, this is where you separate the men from the boys, right? The guys up there above, those are ballers. Those are guys that, we said that's our top 20. Now we're in that 21 through 27 range. A lot of good players here, as you can see that I have on the board there. Now we're down to D tier, and now we're talking about Olave.
So that's like
Flowers,
fringe top
more.
25, top 30, like rock solid guys that are going to get you 1,000 yards, 7 to 8 touchdowns, maybe give you a wide receiver 1 season with a big year. But
and this is where comparing 24 versus 25 is huge, because before the landing spot, you have to really prefer Worthy over Burden, just because of what he did down the stretch. However, I think Burden has top 12 draft upside. Like, he could go as early as 12 to the Cowboys. He's someone that's explosive top end talent. We saw it in 2023 where he was everybody's wide receiver 1. His yards after the catch ability, like, he's a different type of wide receiver. He's a lot of Debo light, a lot of Jaden Reed plus, but landing spot's huge. Like, if we get him, if Cooper Kupp leaves and he goes to the Rams, I think they could really utilize him, and I think, but then you get him going to, like, for instance, if he went to the Bears last year in a Waldron offense, you're like, all right, it's over. It's not going to happen. He needs a system.
Yeah.
So, like,
his range of outcomes is wild. That's why I'm lower on him than the consensus. And he's kind of in that wide receiver 3-4 range for me, because I do think that he has some Laviska Shenault, and like people have been talking a lot about that, the yards after catch, like relying on that, getting the ball in his hands. That's like a worst case. He's more of like that Jaden Reed, Debo type of player. He doesn't play like Debo, but he wins after the catch like Debo does.
Correct.
He could be like the Traylon Burks, Quentin Johnson of this process, where he's just an absolute bust year one, and it's like, what the heck? He could also be Rashee Rice, right? And be a guy that has a really good year one and then blows the roof off the ceiling in 2020 or in his second year going in, because he's that explosive yak guy that's going to be a phenomenal slot wide receiver in the NFL. I think his game is more likely to translate now than it would have 5 years ago, like when Laviska busted, right? And that's another guy that had a really good sophomore year, came out and busted in his junior year in college and kind of had a down year, and then came out in the league and flashed, scored a ton of touchdowns, played that kind of scat back satellite wide receiver slot role, and then kind of failed to get anything more than that. But I think Burden's much more polished than Laviska was, more of that Jaden Reed, Rashee Rice type route runner and explosive player. So first round,
he's a much better route runner. Man, Laviska Shenault was they used a lot as a running back.
He's just a beast,
What's cool about Luther Burden is, I started tracking, broken tackles, and Ashton Junsey's another level with 150. Cam Scatterbo was at like 97. Judkins was at 78. Hampton 66. All the major guys. Travion was at 66. Luther Burden broke 64 tackles last year. Like, for a wide receiver, that's insane. You know what I mean? So that's why I like that you see some Rashee Rice in his game, because he is a good route runner. And once he gets there, what did Rashee Rice? He's elite at yards per route run. What else is he good at? Yards after the catch. He is one of the best in the league. And I think Luther Burden, if he went to KC like that, which isn't going to happen, but if he was in Rashee Rice's role, he would thrive. He has to be there. And
I think Rams, Texans, Chargers, Cowboys, Dolphins, if Tyreek leaves, would be like the best case scenarios for him, because I think I think his range of outcomes is wild. Like, I do think there's like Shenault and Curtis Samuel, like if he just doesn't hit and doesn't translate. And then there's Rashee Rice, Jaden Reed, like a Debo type of player, DJ Moore, like those type of players as well as a range of outcome. So I do think his landing spot matters more than an Eguka, because Eguka is a guy you can throw on any offense, and he's going to go be an elite route runner, separator, and be a safety blanket, stretch the field a little bit, win after the catch, do it all type. I think Burden can develop into that type of player like Eguka, because he's a great athlete. He's explosive. He's like 210 pounds. So he's definitely a fun player in this cycle. And I think all these rookie wide receivers that we're talking about are being undervalued. It reminds me of a lot of the 2022 draft class, like when Garrett Wilson, I think that class was better as a wide receiver class for sure. But I think like Garrett, London, Olave, Jameson Williams, George Pickens, these guys were super undervalued coming out. And I remember like rookie picks were at the cheapest they were. And it feels like that again with these wide receivers. So take advantage of that value, because I do think these three guys, and you can finish it off. I'll let you cover Travis Hunter at the end and send us home. But I think that these guys can all be wide receiver ones or wide receiver twos in offenses.
So I want to make sure we get all these guys thrown in this proper tier. I mean, Chris Olave, again, injury with the concussions. I love buying him low, because if the Saints get a real quarterback and they start to, he's very much like Garrett Wilson, just hasn't had the quarterback play. Zay Flowers belongs in this tier, but it's kind of a tough spot to buy just with production. I think DJ Moore is going to be phenomenal this year. If you put him in that Amon'Ra, St. Brown role for Ben Johnson, I'm super excited about that. I know he's the oldest guy in this group, but he belongs in here. Jordan Addison's been phenomenal as the wide receiver 2. The question mark is it JJ McCarthy? Is it Sam Darnold? Is JJ McCarthy going to support 2 guys there? But the last guy of this tier, and ultimately either the biggest bargain you're going to get in your rookie draft or the biggest disappointment because he's playing 2 positions, but Travis Hunter really, if you told me he was a full-time wide receiver, he's in tier 3. He's in that B tier with 10. He's up there. Like, you could say over 10. You could put him right there. And that's, I think we might see him. He wants to play both. If we saw him as a full-time wide receiver, he's up there. If he plays both,
nobody knows with him.
You're going to get him here. And I see a lot of early rookie drafts, because yes, some people are degenerates and they're doing rookie drafts now. They have him going in the second round, and it's going to be tough to invest here. But I do like him in this tier above the guys in the next tier, which is Metcalf, Pickens, Waddle, J-Mo, Ayuk. If you're contending, sure, go ahead and get one of those guys. But pure ceiling, Travis Hunter, if you're a rebuilding team and you're drafting this way, you got to put him in here. And I think in the next tier, you could hear Trey Harris really start to ascend. But it's these big four. Harris is my 5. That's the next guy I really love in this class.
Golden too, yeah.
Golden. So this class is good. There are 5 good, maybe 6 good wide receivers. After that, it's going to be a little tricky. Then you just say, you know what? It's loaded with running backs. We're going to do a similar show like this on the running backs because we like to show you comparative, right? If you guys have not hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel, we're approaching 3,000. Help us out with that. Share it with your friends. But what we try to do is we give you actionable advice. We're not just saying, here it is, look at this. It's saying, all right, here's the tiers. Let's start making some deals out of this. Let's start making some moves because rankings don't matter. Tiers do. And if you look at these clear tiers that we've shown you, where you're going to look over and you're going to see that, tier 1, you got Jefferson and Chase. And tier 2, you're going to have Malik, Lamb, Amon'Ra, Puka, BTJ. You start taking the guys from tier 1 and you trade to tier 2 plus. Or if you're in tier 2 and you're, moving on, now you trade from tier 2 to tier 3 plus and insulate with rookie picks. Get yourself into position that you have as much fluidity, as much liquid assets as possible, and go smash your leagues, man. I mean, Snoog and I love talking wide receivers. We're going to do a running back one that's just going to blow your mind. So make sure you guys subscribe. Make sure you check out the Patreon, patreon.com/smash accept. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and enjoy the process.